This conference is less than a fortnight since Rishi Sunak watered down the government's net zero targets. Over the weekend, he unveiled measures that, in his words, will slam the brakes on the war on motorists. So the Tories' candidate for London Mayor, Susan Hall, has also promised to scrap Sadiq Khan's controversial ULEZ scheme. And, let's be honest, ULEZ and net zero will have a massive role to play at the next general election for a variety of different reasons. It taps into how much do you care about the environment. It also, crucially, taps into how much do you care about the money in your pocket. And I'm joined now by the Tories' newest MP, Steve Tuckwell. He won Boris Johnson's old seat of Uxbridge and South Ruislip on the outskirts of London in what was widely seen as a protest vote against the ULEZ expansion. I'm not sure how much you'll appreciate that. I'm sure you were also deeply popular, Steve. But Steve joins me now.
Good to be here.
So, Steve, you are fresh into Parliament. This issue now of ULEZ and net zero is the answer to Rishi Sunak staring him in the face, which is to go even further on net zero.
Well, I think, you just got to look at the Uxbridge by-election and the constituents in my patch, were very clear about their message that they wanted me to send to Sadiq Khan, which was an absolute opposition to ULEZ expansion. He completely ignored those constituents and he's gone ahead with it anyway. As we know, ULEZ wasn't an environmental policy, it was a tax grab, for his failings of TfL finances.
You personally don't believe that there's any environmental benefit to ULEZ? Because obviously some people will push back on that and they will say, well, look, it's cleaner air, it's going to save lives, it's better for our kids.
Yeah, but I'm reading the reports that the Mayor published himself, which demonstrated a negligible impact in air quality improvement. And we can also see his own forecasts, which suggest that Hillingdon, part of my constituency, with Heathrow Airport in its boundaries as well, will have the second best air quality in London by the year 2025. So, outer London is completely different to inner London for air quality, and there was no need to expand ULEZ and hammer the good people of Uxbridge and South Ruislip.
OK, so here we are at Conservative Party conference. What do you want Rishi Sunak to say about things like net zero, about things like ULEZ, dare I say even, 20-mile-an-hour speed limits and all of this stuff? Do you want him to come out stronger? Did he go far enough when he was saying he's going to delay things?
Well, he certainly came out and as he said, he's put the brakes on the war on motorists, and I completely agree with that. There's far too much, hammering of motorists in outer London. Certainly in my constituents, are totally against that. We've got a mayor that's soft on crime, but he's heavy on motorists, hard on motorists, and we need to make sure that we've got the right policies in place. Rishi Sunak,
should he scrap net zero altogether?
No, and I think we're still heading towards net zero as a government policy, but we need to be doing it in a measured way and taking people with us. We saw in the by-election that people it's too fast, too quick. They had 9 months' notice to ULEZ, and it wasn't in his initial manifesto either. The expansion of ULEZ, into inner London and the South Circular and the North Circular was included in the manifesto, and it did have a lot of notice included with it as well.
Forgive me for this, but when you were elected, there were some, I'm going to say, relatively uncomfortable shots of you and Rishi Sunak. Do you like him?
I think he's a great Prime Minister. We're going to hear from him tomorrow. We've certainly heard some announcements over the past couple of days. We've got issues of substance, and the Uxbridge by-election was an issue of substance that people of Uxbridge and South Ruislip turned to the Conservatives.
Did Rishi Sunak win you the election?
I think, it was the Conservatives that won the election. We campaigned on an issue of substance. It wasn't just ULEZ, but we campaigned on retaining our hospital, we campaigned on retaining our police station, and we campaigned on myself being a hyper-local candidate as well. OK,
right, so final one to you now then. In terms of vote winners, that was a very vivid demonstration what happened in Uxbridge and Ruislip there, of that being a vote winner. I think it's reasonable to expect that would play the same way across the country if the same issue came up, right? So do you think if Rishi Sunak says, well, I will scrap all ULEZ schemes right across the UK, stop them from ever coming into existence, that he would win big in places? Do you want him to do that?
Well, he's already said that he's going to champion the motorist. He is looking very carefully at these 20-mile-an-hour zones, which is, across Wales, he's hammering the motorists in Wales. He's also talked about, curtailing local councils in their desperation to expand, LTNs as well. So he's already said that he was on the side of, and will champion in motorists going forward.
He's on the side of drivers. He says, look, thank you very very much. Fantastic to have you on the show,
Good to
really.
be here.
And congratulations as well. That is the Conservatives' newest MP, Steve Tuckwell, of course, won Boris Johnson's old seat of Uxbridge and South Ruislip. Some said against the Aussie knew he was going to win all the time, but there we go. Joining me now, though, is Jim Dale, who's a senior meteorologist at British. Stay where you are, you'll be on camera. Senior meteorologist at British Weather Services and friend of the show. Jim, thank you very much. Now, I'm aware that you two can't hear each other, I don't think, so I'm just going to keep it to Jim and I, actually. But, Jim, I think you might have heard what was said a little bit there, which was that he doesn't think that ULEZ was actually an environmental policy at all, and that actually, if Rishi Sunak wants to get more votes, he should scrap things like ULEZ going forward full time.
I think ULEZ is a little bit of a red herring, to be honest with you. As far as the environment is concerned, yeah, there's an element of that, but the bigger picture is climate change and net zero. ULEZ is just a very small part of that. I think that is very clear. And by the way, Steve won his seat. Congratulations, Steve. I know you can't hear me. You scraped home because you managed to reduce your majority, or the Tory majority, from roughly 8,000 to 400. I don't really call that a victory in a seat such as Uxbridge, which is right next door to where I am at the moment in High Wycombe. We've got a Conservative MP, Steve Baker, who's a climate denier, standing against Emma Reynolds, of the Labour candidate. And I'd just like to say that will be a fierce fight in my particular seat.
OK, couple of things there then, Jim. Stay where you are. We were going to let you get going, but I'm going to have to get you to respond to this, I'm afraid. Steve, he says that it wasn't a particularly good victory for you. You scraped home, right? And that actually this isn't a particularly strong sign that people there care about things like getting rid of ULEZ.
Well, I completely disagree. You know, I wasn't expected to win. All polls, all pundits, all the media was expecting me to lose, by a landslide. You know, and again, I can only quote the many thousands of doors that myself and my team knocked on during the by-election campaign, and the universal anger and frustration to ULEZ was there, loud and proud.
OK, all right, thank you very much, Jim. I'm going to bring you back in now. So there you go. I mean, the fact is, Jim, look, it might be unpopular for you because I know that this is a massive. Well, this is your life, isn't it? The climate, weather, meteorology, and I get that. But unfortunately, a lot of the public just aren't anywhere near as bothered about it as you are, and we are in the business of winning elections.
There was a little poll I've mentioned to this previously that came out of the local elections, which actually suggested on the returns that some nearly 70% of people were in favour of net zero, and only 20% again. So look, certain things are happening with the climate. We saw them in New York a couple of 3 days ago. We saw it in Libya. We saw it in other parts of the world at various times. We're seeing it this week. Wait until Saturday, Sunday, Monday. You're going to see.
Right, but you wouldn't have a referendum on it, though, Jim, would you? Have you changed on that, Jim? I mean, would you have a Come on, would you have a referendum on ULEZ or net zero anywhere in the country? Would you have a referendum on those two things?
I don't think ULEZ will ever come into it as far as a referendum is concerned. It's not a big enough subject, to be frank with you. And I think even if it was, I think it would be one hands down. I don't think people enjoy pollution in any shape or form. If we're talking about war against motorists, well, what about the war that's being played out by the Conservative Party against pedestrians and the poor, basically, because that's what that's about. As far as net zero is concerned, I'd be very comfortable with the referendum in terms of if it ever happened, because I think it would be one hands down. People are not stupid. They can see the climate is changing, and it's being rebuffed and in reverse gear by this Conservative government.
OK, Jim, it's strong stuff. I'm going to let Steve just come back to that. Two things, right? Firstly, Jim says that if there was a referendum on ULEZ and net zero, he thinks that his side would win, right? The second thing is he said the Conservatives talk a lot about having a war on motorists, the war against motorists, sorting that out. He says, what about the war on pedestrians and the poor?
Well, the first point about a referendum on ULEZ, I ran a referendum on ULEZ and I won. So that's the first point. And in terms of pedestrians, we need to be making sure that there's good transport planning policies in place, and that we keep pedestrians and vehicles separate. But we can't just keep hammering motorists across outer London and across the country, as we've seen in London and we've seen in other parts of the country as well.
All right, well, look, thank you very, very much. I will finally now release you from that chair. You've been here long enough, I think. Probably longer here than you've actually been an MP. Steve Tuckwell there, who's the Tories' newer MP. And we had Jim Dale as well. Jim, thank you very much for coming on, meteorologist, friend of the show as well, always fights his corner